Welcome everyone to this very special episode of Real Time. If you have not seen Avengers Endgame, consider this your spoiler warning because we will be talking about that movie and everything that follows it.
Wow, that's a very solid spoiler warning. Thanks, Ryan.
Yeah.
It is the point that we decided that for the sixth episode that we've recorded that we wouldn't do a general discussion of the movie because it would be too spoilerific. So we thought we'll separate it out and put it into a separate episode and talk for maybe half an hour or so, which makes the sixth episode really, really giant. But you know, it is what it is.
Consider this 6.5.
Yeah, we'll call it 6.5. I think it's the easiest way to call it. I guess we start at the start and just go with general impressions and then kind of start unwinding and unraveling all the things that we want to talk about. We haven't really made a kind of scheduled plan for this. We just kind of go off the cuff and see where the conversation goes.
Yeah. My opinion, I think they probably nailed it as a conclusion to the overall story, but there are a lot of loose ends that they could have done better, and they've left a lot more open as well.
Yeah, it's funny, and straight after the movie, I felt, wow, what a movie! Like, you know, it has pretty much everything you would expect of you know, the finality of 22 films. But the more I sit in hindsight, I kind of realize I wish they'd done this a little differently, this a little bit differently. Some approaches are good, and other things you start questioning. There are things that are good and bad, and there are things that it doesn't really matter, like if it was changed or not. But there's some big, obviously conclusional changes for the entire franchise moving forward, which also, and we'll touch on this a little bit too, is the trailer for Spider-Man Far From Home.
The second trailer.
But it's interesting to see. I mean, I think in a lot of ways things happened that we expected, and we kind of ended up where we expected it. But that still doesn't mean that you hope that you wouldn't see something different.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I still think, you know, I'm still processing it too after almost 3 weeks after watching it when it first came out, and there's still a lot of stuff I still can't wrap my head around, like just what happened and.
There's a lot of questions.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's the idea. They wanted to leave you with questions. I mean, maybe we should start at the start. It wasn't a surprise to see it pick up where it did and go straight to them. That, you know, basically they kill Thanos but he's already made the stones disappear, and it's a good setup. I thought that was a really great setup, and it was kind of unexpected, but it was kind of a really obvious place to go, only in hindsight. And it set up a lot of like disbelief in where they could go, because they were so committed to the idea immediately of like, we need to fix this.
Yeah, we need to get the stones and reverse what's happened.
Yeah.
And Thor finally went for the head.
Yes.
Just
Well, he went for the arm first, then the head.
Yeah.
Which is ironic, because that's kind of what he should have also done
in the first place, yeah. Well, because I remember in Infinity War, sorry. I remember thinking, did Thanos say go for the hand or head? And then I think it might have been you that clarified that it was head or something.
Oh, even I thought it was hand actually at first. And then I was like, oh no, it was head.
So it makes sense that he did go for the hand and then the head eventually.
It's what is the next step, which is this 5-year time jump, which is probably the most shocking in some respects. Everyone knew there was going to be a time variance. Nobody expected 5 years, I don't think. I don't remember hearing a single prediction going on, it's going to be years later.
Yeah,
Everyone thought, it's 6 months, 12 months.
Yeah, I at least heard rumours-wise it'd be a few months to at least a year, but 5 years was just a bit of a shot.
That was quite a bit of a shot. It's interesting because that it begins the real opening of can of worms, because when we come to the conclusion later on, this whole 5-year thing has a major impact on. I really think that the writers didn't really think that part through so well. Like, they went, yeah, great, let's make it 5 years because it has a really big impact and has and which it does, but because of the way the conclusion plays out, and I guess we'll work our way through the movie. It's kind of one of those things where it has this weird. It has all these side effects which are very not great, to be honest, and especially for Spider-Man as well. It kind of is there's one very big thing that even they've been talking to the cast about it and trying not to spoil it, but also kind of approach it. It's kind of like, it doesn't quite work. It's quite convenient. I guess the most obvious point to start with the 5-year thing is that the characters are they've separated themselves out in a lot of ways. They're, because we've managed to get Stark survives obviously, and but
Along with Nebula and comes back thanks to Captain Marvel.
Yeah, but his position is almost reversed. Like, as a story arc, it makes a lot of sense.
Yep.
He's kind of almost regressed back to where he was pre-Iron Man, almost, because he's just so defeated. But so all the other characters, all their paths all make sense. They all go in the right directions. It all makes sense for what's needed narratively. But it just comes down to dumb, and people pointed out, and it's just like, it's so silly. It comes into that rat,
Yeah,
and the storage unit, and then Ant-Man.
Was it 14,600,005 different futures, and it just turns out to be a rat that, through sheer dumb luck, presses buttons.
Well, I guess it won't be just in one of those, because I'd assume it happens in a lot of them. But it's so dumb.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, it's just dumb.
Yeah,
It's silly.
just for that one thing to happen.
Yeah.
But it is pretty much the crux of what happens is that you see Ant-Man's van locked up in a storage locker after 5 years, and a rat comes across and just happens to press all the buttons, which releases him. And then to him, it's only been, 5 hours or something? Or
5 hours.
But it's been 5 years to everyone else, so he's got no idea what's gone on when he sees like a whole bunch of cars piled up and wanted posters.
Well, yeah,
not wanted posters, missing posters.
He's confused just at first with the fact he's in a storage unit, not in on a rooftop, where they were. It works, but then there's this, like, someone made a big comment to me, and the bit I don't get is, like, he goes to his ex-wife's house, and his daughter's still there, and she's now 5 years older, and he's shocked and everything, but then he kind of abandons her straight away.
Yeah.
I would have taken her with me. Like, she's survived by herself for 5 years at this point. You've got to think about this. Nobody realised this fact that obviously her parents disappeared, and now she's been, like, surviving by herself for 5 years. Like,
I hadn't actually thought of that myself until you just said it.
yeah,
so.
exactly. Like, well, we assume so because it looked like there was nobody else there.
Yeah.
So that means, all three essentially of her parents, because that included her stepfather and him as well, all disappeared, assumedly in the snap hit. In his case, obviously wasn't, but she'd know this.
Yeah.
And then, she just appears, and then immediately he's off to the Avengers by himself.
Off to upstate New York from San Fran.
It doesn't make any sense. I would have taken... He should have taken her with her. That was the first thing that really took me out of the movie. I was just like, this makes no sense. He hasn't seen her. She's now 5 years older and has so much to tell him about what's been going on. This is a great point for narrative information dropping for him, not maybe for us as an audience, but still. And that he just leaves her? What? No. It's the most important thing to him. Like, just seemed uncharacteristic.
Yeah.
So he ends up going to the Avengers facility, and basically from there it ensues a series of just logical leaps of, like, he has this idea about time through the quantum realm. Then they come through the idea of trying to test it, and then they try to get Stark involved, and he doesn't want to, and then he does. All this is very long, but when I'm narratively saying this, all could be very condensed, and it's the one bit I think in the movie that drags the most. They kind of get the Hulk back, and now the Hulk is Smart Hulk.
Yeah. I think in wanting to get Tony back, I think he's kind of... It's kind of like in Iron Man 3 where he's got PTSD from Avengers. It's kind of the same sort of feel in this from Infinity War when, he was on Titan and he's seen, like, Spider-Man and Star-Lord and all that snap away, and then
Spider-Man
especially Spider-Man, and like they effectively lost, so he feels as though he's got quite a lot of blame on himself, so that's why he feels bad, and he's like nut to everyone else. He just doesn't want to.
That scene where he comes when he comes back and they have the argument, just to go backwards, I guess, a little bit, when they have the argument with him and Cap, is really good. It's one of the best. It's probably one of the most emotive scenes in the entire movie, and it's a really good piece of acting from, like, everyone in the scene, to be honest, but especially Robert Downey Jr. It's very... You feel that. You feel the emotional weight of that. it makes sense. There's nothing in the movie that, for the most part, except for like a couple of things that really don't feel uncharacteristic. Kind of the small moments that everyone has, they kind of earn, but some get more than others. That's just the simple truth of the way the movie works. And it's the same with how Infinity War worked as well. Like, certain characters had a lot of stuff, others didn't.
Yeah, very little, yeah.
So anyway, Stark decides he's going to get involved because he's now got a daughter.
Yeah. He's had a revelation of how he can possibly help them.
And so he decides to do so. And there's a little bit of a moment where his character has to decide whether or not he'll even help. But Pepper reminds him that if he doesn't, he'll go crazy, which is entirely true and entirely within character, so it all made sense.
And of course, in typical Avengers or Stark fashion, they get a new machine built in the matter of, days or weeks or whatever, with no explanation of how long it's actually been.
Yeah, let's just I don't know, avoid that.
Yeah.
Let's watch another scene of Ant-Man losing his tacos and the Hulk giving him one.
Let's just have like a science montage and science jargon of how we got this all of a sudden and what it's going to do.
The scene with Smart Hulk and the small miniature version in the van and Ant-Man being old and young and was kind of funny. But again, it seemed slightly unnecessary in the scheme of things. It was just to set up how much of a failure it was. But it just
initially, especially without Stark's help. Yeah,
it is what it is. It's more for humour than it is almost for the purpose of the narrative. At that point, they come up with the plan of a time heist, as far as
it's pretty much is what they call it in the film, it's what it was somewhat rumoured to be named as well.
And so they have to work out where all the stones are, at what times, and where is the best places to steal them from, based off their knowledge of where they are at various points. Now this sets up my first major issue, and I've mentioned this to you, which is the whole thing. Nebula's there the whole time. She observes everything, which becomes a very crucial plot point later on. But when they talk about the Soul Stone, she never once talks about the same thing she talked about on Titan, which is that 2 of them left and 1 only came back, and there must be some reason for that. It kind of seems like a bit of a cheat at missing the point. Like, it seems like a really important piece of information the character should have imparted, and yet it doesn't, and nobody questions it because they discuss quite in depth about all the stones. It seems like one of the things that we talk about is that this was the last one that need to be found, and nobody knows how it was gotten or where it was exactly, other than the planet. But when it happened, 2 people went, one came back.
Yeah. Now, once again, we're going to touch on this as spoiler alert. Speaking of that, the Soul Stone. So, in Infinity War, we know Thanos went there with Gamora because Gamora knew where it was, and Redstone gave them the whole rundown of what had to happen.
Red Skull, sorry.
Who did I say?
Redstone. It's just because you got stone in mind.
Yeah, sorry. Red Skull, thank you. Told them what had happened, and then, of course, Thanos started crying because he knew what had to be done.
Yes.
And he tossed Gamora over so he could get that stone. Pretty much, very similar thing happens in Endgame. Red Skull tells...
Version of Red Skull, yes.
Version of Red Skull tells the newly come back Hawkeye, or Ronin, if you want to call him that.
Oh, you completely missed it. This is the thing, it's just like so much going, because obviously the movie opens with his scene with his family being snapped over.
His daughter is the new Hawkeye, which could, eventually show up on Disney Plus.
Yeah.
And that's what leads him going to Japan and becoming Ronin. But so we completely blazed over that. I don't know why.
Just one of those things. It wasn't important until it's important, and you realise, they set this up earlier. Yeah, we're not thinking about this as logically as we thought we would.
It's all right. So Hawkeye and Black Widow had gone to Vormir to get the Soul Stone, and then Red Skull had told them what had to happen. And of course, being the 2 warriors they had a back and forward fight. Either kept, trying to sacrifice each other or sacrifice themselves for the other one.
Yeah.
And then eventually it came down to them hanging off a cliff from one of Hawkeye's arrows with a rope on it. And then Black Widow had, I think, cut the rope and let herself fall so he could return with the stone.
to get to have his family because she can't have kids, and
she's got a lot of blood.
read in a ledger. That's
read in a ledger. That's
the thing that's really silly to me about that whole thing is the fact that in the end, almost both of them could have died. It's so dumb. It's so dumb.
I kind of think that's maybe what they were going for, is to keep people on their toes, even though they're sitting down. That
edge of the
seat, that'll work better. That it could have gone either way, and it could have been either one of them.
Yeah, but again, this negates, to me, is negated by the whole fact that they should have known what they were getting themselves into. Everyone else knew exactly what they were getting themselves into.
Yeah.
They had a much more obvious plan about what was happening, and there was information there that was not informed, that should have been, that made complete sense, and there's no reason for the character not to, and it's very frustrating. And it has nothing to do with the character death. Like, in the end, one of them was going to have to die, or someone was going to have to die if it wasn't one of them. It's interesting, though. I did start a debate on the internet as to if other Avengers had gone, what would have happened? What would have happened if Captain America and Bucky had gone? What would have happened if Iron Man and
Iron Man and Hulk sort of thing?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I remember a bunch of can of worms with it, essentially, and that's the bigger issue. I think it comes down to, is because of the fact there was the lack of information.
Yeah, it was probably developed that way as well. Of like, right, who can we send where, and as to what purpose?
It starts
each character be.
Yeah, exactly. It starts the bigger problem, which is the thing that the internet, people on the internet, I'm going to say the internet in general, are having issues with, which is and talking to people as well about it. It's just that in the end, Black Widow, Natasha does not get a very good arc in this movie. She doesn't get a very good. At the start, it seems like she's getting some positive. Well, when you say positive growth, her character's in a really big slump after the 5-year thing. But
she's like the de facto leader of S.H.I.E.L.D. or the Avengers now.
And, but it's character change, and it's interesting, and there's some actual stakes going on, and then all of a sudden she's just essentially thrown away. And it's through her own actions, and so you kind of try to point to it as like, well, it was her decision, and it's like, yeah, but you started making this character,
tried to build her up, just to throw her down.
It's kind of missed, and it's not that one or the other was more important. It's just the fact that the way it's handled is very poor, and then the aftermath of that is even worse. Like Tony Stark, and we get to this later on, he gets a big thing, and she gets nothing.
Yeah,
and that's caused a lot of grief on the internet. So. And there's a lot of discussion. It's almost as if to justify the death. Oh, well, I tried bringing her back. I can't bring her back. Can't bring her back. Tried. Can't bring it. So it's just to almost hammer it home. Or she's dead, people. She's dead.
Yeah, and we might as well bring this up now. But there's still going to be a Black Widow TV series, which at this stage is
TV series, film.
Oh, it's a film. Sorry, my mistake. Which is assumedly going to be a prequel now.
Wow, it can be, really. Yeah. Like, you can't, unless there's some reason why they're going to bring the character back, even though they kept saying she's dead.
Yeah,
it can only be a prequel movie. That's all it can be at this point. And the annoyance of that, in some respects, is the fact that we've had to wait until the character is killed off in order to get a solo movie, which makes zero sense by itself anyway.
Yeah, it's like, why not just follow the same sort of formula you've had with Captain America, Thor, and Iron Man? Yes, I know the big three, so to speak, and they've all had their own origin films, but
at the point, still post Avengers, they should have had a...
Yeah, and I mean, you've had a Captain Marvel solo film, and
she wasn't that important to the movie, even Endgame. It's a silly state of affairs. So the time heist splits everything into different areas. So we've got Ant-Man, Iron Man, Captain America, and Hulk going to the Battle of New York.
Yep, back to 2012.
You've got Rhodey as War Machine and Nebula going to basically 2014.
2014, yep.
Yeah, where what's the... I can always remember the
I can't even remember.
It's the one from the start of Guardians, which was a hilarious callback. I did enjoy that.
Yeah, that was good.
It was very funny. Showing how much of an idiot Star-Lord is dancing and singing on that
to himself and watching it from
a distance. Yeah.
Well, because when you first see it in Guardians, you're kind of watching it from a third-person point of view.
But you can hear the music. So
yeah, and when you watch it again in Endgame, would you call it a fourth-person view?
I guess it kind of
because you're
is.
watching it from a different angle.
And you're also watching other people watching it.
Yeah, so I suppose it would be a fourth-person.
Yeah, it's
view?
kind of it's very clever. And it wasn't even the original plan for that. There was going to be like an underwater because the planet was supposed to be underwater, and that's why it hadn't been found, and all this sort of stuff. And it was going to be a big underwater thing, and they decided, no, it'd be funnier just to do it this way. Yeah, and that works all fine. It makes sense narratively, but the interesting thing is then Nebula gets there's because there's two in the same timeline. All of a sudden, there's this entanglement of minds because of the way she's
it's kind of like a wireless Ethernet connection between her between
her 2014 self,
2014 self, and what the 2019? No, 2023 self. Yeah. And this leads to the big opening of the plot where Thanos is tipped off that something's going on. Yeah. And also where all the stones are too. Yeah, absolutely.
In advance of where he originally would have found them in the timeline. And this creates the big change in the situation. And so obviously, Natasha dies. They get the Soul Stone. Clint comes back with this. Gets the Soul Stone. There are two stones in New York.
3.
Is it 3?
Well, technically 3.
Yeah, they only get 2.
Yeah.
Loki escapes with one of them, so they end up having to change their plans and go back to the 1970s. It's a lot in a small space of time, and it's all relatively cleverly connected, and they need more PIM particles to do more travel, so that's another reason why they go to the 1970s, because they can steal some from the lab, which...
They've just got enough to go back to the 70s, so...
Yeah, it was either go back to where they came from in 2023, or go back to the 70s. Or
do another time jump, so... Cap and Iron Man decide to go back to the 1970s and go back to where the cube was previously before that, which would have been a shield bunker, which was Captain America's old training ground.
So it was. I'll just go back to the Battle of New York thing. I think it was very cleverly done. I think of all the ones that time travel wise, they had a lot to work with, and they worked out very sensible ways of doing it. You see some of the big main beats of the original Avengers from a different perspective. Some clever jokes. There's some self-referential stuff. There's a scene with Captain America in a lift where it looks like it's going to be a battle, but he ends up just saying "Hail Hydra."
Yeah, which is a nice nod to the comics as well,
and
the Hidden Empire,
and also the movie itself, the Winter Soldier. Then he ends up fighting himself.
Yeah.
And America's ass.
Yeah, finding out. Yeah, yeah, that is America's ass.
I did enjoy that fight. It was hilarious. Mostly also the I can do this all day. Yes, I know.
Yeah, that was he's very frustrated at himself.
Yeah. It's like this is what I used to be like. Ugh.
Yeah. He hasn't learned over the few years he's been thawed out.
Yeah.
It was quite good. Yeah,
I was waiting for that, but it didn't happen.
As we did touch on, Loki did escape with the Tesseract after it looked to be all hunky dory and like it was going to be locked up by the future Avengers to take back with them. But I think Ant-Man had shrunk down and gone into 2012 Iron Man's armor.
Just into his chest.
Into his chest, sorry, so give him a heart attack or something.
But at the same time, Hulk comes flying down because the original Hulk, not the angry Hulk, had
the
been
2012
told
Hulk
had to take the stairs because he couldn't get in the lift, so he comes down and smacks the door over him, which knocks the 2023 version of Tony Stark with the case with the Tesseract, which he'd taken across, which then knocks the Tesseract out. Loki grabs it, sees it, grabs it, and disappears.
And so that opens another can of worms too. It's like he knows how to use it as a teleportation. Did he always know that?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Because he teleported in the original Avengers, if you remember, came through using...
That's right. He would.
But they had the Tesseract and used it as the open portal that it had.
That's
so I assume if he can do that, he
probably did know how to use it. Okay, that makes sense now.
It's and then so between that and the 1970s stuff, there's a lot going on. And but it's just about character beats. It's about those situations in there. It's about the stuff in the New York thing for Steve to see Peggy, for Tony to reconnect with his father.
They his dad after. Didn't really get along with in the first place, but
had a better respect for him after everything that he'd learned over the years.
And it sort of
never got to say
think
goodbye.
too, never got to say goodbye. So I think that was more of a very prophetic sort of moment as well, and it's kind of emotional as well. Like I was like, oh, it's so good that they included something like that, but kind of a bit. Is it gonna ruin the timeline?
Well, it has its own
yeah.
timeline question, but on top of it as well, like the thing that I don't get about it as well is that I do get about it, but it's like it's so obvious. As soon as you have that scene in the movie, you're like, oh well, you know what's gonna happen to Tony now? He's got everything he wanted.
Yeah,
and it's kind of like, I can see where this is going
yeah.
at this point. So they all return from the various things. Obviously, Natasha does not return, so they all realise this, and then they're all sad and grumpy about it, and Hulk throws a bench.
And of course, Nebula doesn't return either.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, she's still stuck in her
timeline.
Captured her. She's been captured by...
I forgot about this, but yes, that was what I was going to say before.
Yeah, by the other accusers and taken to Thanos.
Yeah. And at this point, it all starts to unravel, and then Thanos is able to use the Pym particles, which apparently, I was confused about this at the time, but I was like, why does he manage to all of a sudden go from, they've got one dose of Pym particles to being able to have enough to send fleets of armies of, apparently they synthesized it. Apparently he's got world-class genius people working with him, so they're able to do the same thing. So that's explains it. That's what the writer said. If people were wondering,
It's kind of a shitty explanation.
Yeah, it is. It's just an explanation. That's what it is. But okay, whatever. It basically hurries through a lot of the situation because all of a sudden they've got the stones. They make a Iron Man. Well, Tony makes a glove.
They make their own sort of iron gauntlet.
Yeah, which is kind of cool. It's made of the nanoparticles and it adjusts to the wearer's size. They have a bit of an argument over who's going to do it. Hulk ends up saying he'll do it in the end, and he does.
Because of the gamma radiation and his exposure to it, he's probably the most likely one to survive it.
Well, that's also, again, completely convenient that they've just revealed this fact that it's gamma radiation that it works on. Yeah, okay.
I suppose it's probably not one stone by itself, but I suppose all six together probably emits...
a
certain amount of radiation.
It's fine. We'll pass it. So he snaps his fingers and Aaron comes back. 5 years removed. Exactly as they were 5 years earlier. The people that disappeared come back. Rather than... This is my big issue. When I was going into the movie, and I was like, if the time heist thing is correct and there's going to be some sort of time jump, what's going to happen? Are we going to go back to the Battle of Wakanda, or are we going to do it from the time period that we're at, wherever that is at that point? I expected it to still be a year. 5 years was quite a stretch. Yeah. And the fact that just creates so much more problems.
Oh, for sure.
It shouldn't have been done at the time period it was in. There should have been a more resolve to go back around.
It creates issues for the people that survived and the people that got snapped away.
Oh, both. It creates narrative issues, and it creates questionable continuities, and this whole thing has the whole time travel thing, and we haven't even touched on that. I kind of want to come back to it later on, because it's almost its own discussion, so we'll leave it until afterwards. But it's just messy, and
it's your kind of typical time travel faux pas where they lay out the ground rules, but then they break them more than they adhere to them.
Yeah, and we'll come to that because there's some stuff in there that I have much more issues with even than the general gist of it. Anyway, Thanos arrives and attacks the compound. Mm-hmm. You think Ant-Man gets killed because he's blowing up, but actually he shrinks, and if you pay attention, apparently you can see this, but it's so snaps
so quick.
Snapping, you miss it. It's you wouldn't know. I was like, holy shit, they just killed a bunch of people. But no, they all survive somehow, miraculously. Makes no sense, but whatever. And they're all kind of buried within the remains of the Avengers compound, which is now pulverized thanks to Thanos' giant ship.
And then attacking it from space as well.
Yeah. And then basically it goes through the beats of them trying to keep the gauntlet away from Thanos. Thanos ends up fighting a bunch of them, and there's kind of almost two sects of people dealing with, like, the other Nebula, and Gamora's turned up as well, the 2014 Gamora. So there's that story going on, while also Thanos waits for them to bring him the stones.
Gauntlet, he's just sitting there patiently with his double-bladed sword.
But he knows there's going to be a fight, and so this is where our main three. Do you know what we haven't even touched on? We didn't even touch on the fact that we got Thor, Fat Thor. Like
That's
we haven't
right.
we haven't talked about
Thor,
this.
see. We should have planned this out.
No, it's fine. It's just
off the cuff.
It's off the cuff. But like,
Please excuse this.
yeah, we're just kind of thinking about it. This is a breakdown, but this shows you what's important. This is kind of why I don't mind it being off the cuff. It kind of shows you. So Thor's arc in this is way minimalized compared to how important he was in the previous one, and to basically they just find him as a drunk fat man in the new Asgard, which is in Norway. And Valkyrie's now in charge of the township, and she's doing a better job than he is of ruling the Asgardians, basically.
Interesting side note, it's also the same town from Captain America where Red Skull finds the Tesseract, and you see it at the start of Thor as well, with being the home of the Tesseract. The
hiding place for it.
Yeah, the hiding place for it, and the locals were, they praised the Asgards as the gods.
The Norse gods, yeah.
Yeah, so it's a nice little touch too, is that they return to that place.
Makes sense. But again, it just shows you, because so his thing, it's the other part of we were talking about the time heist. He ends up having to go get the ether from Jane, which that also adds a lot of questions. Like they extract it somehow. Rocket goes with them and extracts it, but then how do they put it back later on?
Yeah, well, I remember reading online that it didn't need to be put back into Jane. It just needed to be returned to the timeline. So I guess, I don't know, they have some sort of capsule for it, or the stone or whatever, that they can just return it.
I don't know.
It was very confusing.
And this is the same. We didn't talk about, like we were talking about 3. Sorry, the Battle of New York is the time stone with the ancient one.
Instead of Doctor Strange. And this explains a lot to do with the separating timelines. If you don't return the items back to where they came from, then you can have multiple timelines, and that's what makes Loki taking the Tesseract from 2012 after being, I won't say imprisoned, but after being captured by the Avengers.
It creates
a new timeline. So it's why Tony and Cap have to go back to the 1970s to get it.
So Thor ends up talking to his mother Frigga about stuff, and she sees how he is and all this sort of stuff, and kind of gives some advice, which is good considering that she then dies shortly after these events.
The same day, because he has the epiphany that it's that day that they've returned to.
Yeah. And he ends up taking his hammer back, which is kind of awesome, but kind of weird, and it starts its own.
He does it as a joke, is like he puts his hand out, and he's like, just give it a minute, and then it comes, and he's like, yes, I'm still worthy, even though he's like fat and beard's overgrown and depressed. So the three of them end up fighting Thanos, and it's pure fan service at this point. Oh, for sure.
It's
absolutely
scene after scene of like them working together to fight and battling against Thanos, and then one of them will get knocked down, and then all of a sudden something else happens, and then something else happens, and it leads to this point where Thor is attacking him pretty well, and then the tide turns on him, and
so
Thanos is about to like stab him with
Thanos has Stormbreaker in Thor's chest.
It's kind of almost the reverse of...
Yeah, pretty much similar to what Thor was doing to Thanos in Infinity War when he said, I told you you'd pay for that.
Yeah.
But in pure fan service moment, and I'd imagine this would be in all cinemas, but for us in IMAX, you could just hear the crowd surprise.
Well, the hammer just flies out of nowhere and hits Thanos.
Well, you initially see someone pick it up, or something pick it up, and then you see it fly, and it hits Thanos, and then it flies back.
And everyone's kind of shocked to begin with that they what's going on, and then when the reveal of who threw it, the audience just goes nuts. Like, it's obviously the biggest fan moment in that entire movie. Like,
and of course, we're talking about Captain America here, and I mean, I think everybody knew it would possibly happen, and it finally did. And I think who was it? The Russos. Kevin Feige and Joss Whedon have all come out and said that in Age of Ultron, when Cap went to try and lift it, he lifted it that little bit, or he moved it that little bit, and they've all come out and said that he could always lift it, but he just didn't want to do it to embarrass Thor.
Still don't like that excuse.
Or because he's too nice of a guy.
I still don't like that excuse, but whatever.
So apparently Captain America was always worthy to lift Thor's hammer.
So it's great, and it sets up this whole fight again, and then it looks like Thanos, he smashes Cap's shield, and it looks like he's going to win again, and then they will end up teaming up again and pushing him back, and then all of a sudden he calls on his armies, but then we get a on your left.
Yeah.
And basically every single...
And that's a nice callback.
It is a nice callback.
Winter Soldier.
Winter Soldier.
Yeah, to Winter Soldier when Cap said that to Falcon.
And so basically every single person that was involved in the 22 films, more or less, that are still alive, turns up.
Yeah, or they got snapped away, rather.
They got snapped away. And then some, that obviously the people that are still involved currently. And at this point, the Gauntlet's back in play because they managed to have this fight, and Nebula ends up shooting her 2014 self. And it's a lot.
It's kind of a weird one as well.
She's a separate timeline. So I was trying to explain this to someone that they're like, if you shot an illusion self, don't you cease to exist? I was like, no, they're trying to get around the grandfather paradox by saying that there's multiple timelines. It's like, and I said the equatedness is that it would be like, say on a day you left your house at 3:05, and by doing so you walked down the street and you got hit by a bus. But if you didn't leave your house at 3:05, like someone rang you or something stopped you and you left like a minute later, you
wouldn't get hit.
You wouldn't get the bus, so you still exist. And that's the same idea, essentially, that there are multiple timelines based on every decision.
They're trying to get around it, and I think that's what they did with the 2014 Thanos showing up in 2023 and having knowledge of the stones, yet that would negate the whole Infinity War.
No, the Infinity War still existed. As an event, that timeline exists, and it's still concurrent to what we're dealing with, because obviously all the people that went through it are still there. It's just they're coming from a different timeline into that timeline. So everything that happened in those 22 films exists.
Gotcha. Yeah. It's very confusing.
This is the thing. It is quite messy, and this is the problem. We'll come back to it again.
It's what I was saying before. It's like they set ground rules, but then they don't really adhere to them, and it makes everything confusing for everybody.
Yeah. Well, they kind of adhere to them, but they adhere to them in some weird ways. But,
yeah.
So the next 20 minutes is basically keep away. It's Infinity Gauntlet keep away from Thanos.
It's Gauntlet hot potato.
Yeah.
Pretty much. It goes between everybody. It goes
everyone
from,
and
was it Ant-Man, Hawkeye, Spider-Man, Captain Marvel, Black Panther. Almost a who's who of everybody that comes back as well.
It's very well choreographed. There's a lot going on. There's some obvious fan moment scenes. There's a smack in the face moment where they put all the female characters together, which depending on your take was either awesome or was like the stupidest thing possible, and not because of it being females. It's like this is you're padding to fan service instead of giving like a female lineup or a female character movies up until Captain Marvel. You have this moment where you put them all together and that's it. Okay, I can see why people are upset about it. And in the end, basically, to skip over all of it because it's not worth going into detail, in the end, Iron Man steals the gauntlet away from Thanos just before he can snap his fingers. Snaps his fingers and...
It won't say he steals the gauntlet. He steals the stones because he's able to put them back into his own glove.
Which is just conveniently timed as well. And then he snaps his fingers and...
It's so much power for him that he just...
Well, he gets rid of all of Thanos' army. We don't know exactly what he thought, which leads to the question why is Gamora? But like she was obviously helping them, so you'd assume she didn't get snapped away, and I'm pretty sure you see her afterwards. But then there were some questions as to whether or not she disappeared in the snap or not. I don't know. It's weird.
Yeah.
Which is why she vanished. I was reading this the other day. But basically, the power's too much that ends up killing him.
Yeah.
Slowly, but
of course, his fitting last lines last line is echo to the end of the first Iron Man film is I am Iron Man.
Yeah, it's because Thanos says I am inevitable.
Yeah. And I mean, it's very fitting and a good sort of send off. A good, sorry, what?
I was going to say Mr. Anderson.
Yeah. It was definitely a good
inevitability.
Yeah. It was a good send off as well, because I think a lot of people knew it was going to be his last film, or at least major film, barring the odd cameo here and there, which potentially may still happen.
I can
like recordings or something.
I can
but
easily see that.
We'll see what happens in the near future.
So then they have a funeral for him, but not for Natasha, which is where we were going before, which is very weird. It's pretty much a lineup of like all the major characters. There's Ty Simpkins' character from Iron Man 3, which nobody knew who the kid was.
Who's that? It's a lot of speculation online. I was like, how could you not know who he is?
It's the kid from Iron Man 3. It's all it is. And basically, Happy saying to his daughter that he'll get a cheeseburgers. And,
Yeah, that's another nice call to Iron Man as well.
It's all very. It wraps it up reasonably sensibly at that point. So then Captain America's supposed to return all the stones, and then you see the obviousness that he's not going to come back, and he doesn't come back, but then somehow he comes back.
Yeah, him and Bucky have an exchange of "Don't do anything stupid," to which Cap replies, "You left all the stupid with you," or something, or you.
So, no, that's the reverse of what it was. Him. It's Bucky that says that to him this time.
Yeah, that's right. What they said you took all the stupid with you. Yeah, so they do it in the first Avenger.
It is.
They do it in the first Avenger. So it's a nice little callback that they reverse that as well.
But he knows what's going on.
Bucky knows.
He's not coming back. But then the weird bit of the timeline where the old Captain America turns up with the shield to give to Falcon to become the new Captain America, very weird. Because it doesn't make any sense in the narrative sense of the timeline they've been setting out, which we'll get to in a second. But it was understandable, but it felt a little bit like the last Lord of the Rings films, where there was like multiple concluding scenes.
It's like, was it going to end? Yeah.
And then the last scene was obviously showing Cap back in the 40s, and I think it's apparently 1948 with Peggy. And that's how the movie ends.
He finally got his dance with his girl.
Yeah, and no post-credit scene, just a post-credit sound effect, which apparently isn't supposed to mean anything. It's just a nice reference to the first Iron Man.
Yeah, all it is just what sounds to be Tony hammering on his armor in the cave from the first Iron Man film.
Because people are like, does that mean something?
A lot of people are reading into it that it could potentially be Ty Simpkins' character from Iron Man 3 becoming the new Iron Man, but,
I think I'll take it at the face value that they said it's only supposed to be
it's just supposed to be a nice little callback from the first one that, he started it, so we'll finish it with that.
Yeah, exactly.
Which was good.
So the big issue that we both have a little bit is the time jumping stuff. And I have an issue, as I said, it has a lot of ramifications, and we'll come to that at the end of it. But the first thing that really bugs me is when they call out the fact that they're trying to understand the time thing, and then Hulk says you're basing it off movies. They list a hot name, check a bunch of stuff. Karen Gillan said she wishes she'd called out Doctor Who in that list.
Yeah,
which I thought was surprising. Which was quite funny. She's like, I didn't think about it at the time. She goes, I should have told them to mention it. But the problem is they talk about specifically more than any others Back to the Future. More than specifically Back to the Future 2. Then the thing Back to the Future 2 does get wrong, which it narratively is trying to say is the wrong bit, is the fact that in that timeline, if you go, I'm going to explain Back to the Future 2 for anyone who hasn't actually seen this, but in the future timeline in 2015, Biff gets his hands on the almanac, sends himself back to 1955 to give his young self the almanac, which changes his timeline.
And then he's really rich in 1985.
Yeah. There's two bits to it. He manages to bring himself back to the 2015 future that we're already in, and then he dies.
Yeah.
And he disappears, which he shouldn't have even been able to come back in the first place.
Yeah, I think a deleted scene or something I read is supposed to be like
There's a deleted scene,
the 1985, what's Marty's mother's name? I can't even remember now, but Marty's mother in the new 1985 where Biff is rich and got the casino, apparently shoots Biff, and that's what causes future Biff, old Biff, to die. So that's what that is.
Well, it's a different timeline anyway. So, but he shouldn't have been able to come back. And then also, by this, Marty and Doc shouldn't be able to go back to 1985 that's changed. When they go backwards, they should go on their own timeline, which means the 1985 they go back to should be the same that they came from. Yeah. But you can't go forward to your own future, which is why Biff shouldn't be able to go forward to a future that he's changed. Yeah. And this is where they get it right in Endgame, which is that once they were back in, they could go back to the point at which Biff changed the timeline, which means they could go back to 1955, but they shouldn't have seen the outcome of that unless they went forward again from 1955. Yeah. And this is the bit that it gets wrong. But then what it does get right is it explains multiple timelines, which Doc does in his blackboard, trying to explain his alternate 1955, 1985, etc.
It goes off on a little tangent.
And that's the bit that it gets right. And so for them to say wholeheartedly that Back to the Future 2 is Back to the Future gets it wrong is kind of a disservice, because in the end, Endgame is right and as wrong as Back to the Future does. Yeah. So, because we all of a sudden start getting messy timelines where Captain America, who goes back and creates another timeline, the directors and the writers are arguing about this.
Yeah. So I think a lot of people have pointed it out to them. It's like, it makes no sense.
He would go back, he would create a new timeline, but then they're trying to say that he was always in the timeline because the kids that Peggy mentions in Winter Soldier, I think it is,
Yeah.
were already Caps. And,
Yeah. And there's also that in that as well, I think she's there's photos of her and her kids, but there's no photo of her husband, and she's very vague about who she's married.
Yeah, just says he was someone that Captain America saved.
Yeah, and I think there's multiple reports saying that I don't think Marvel per se have come out and said anything official, but there's multiple reports saying that it was Captain America and Peggy.
Oh no, they've
Peggy.
said this.
Have they?
Yeah, they've said that. The writers have said this, but the directors they disagree. This is the thing. The writers and directors disagree about the timeline aspect of Captain America. This is the part that's really annoying. But the thing is, it doesn't make any sense anyway, because as soon as you send him back, it creates a narrative difference.
Yeah.
They can't just assume that he did nothing. This is the thing that bugs me even more on a character level. So now Captain America, having done what he's done in the future, now has to go back to the past to have his happy days with Peggy, but full well knowing the organization she works for is Hydra.
Yeah.
That his best friend is alive and is being used to kill people. All these things that went on in the 70 plus years, 80 years of this
Since
entire timeline, he has to ignore,
sort of
basically.
through, yeah.
I feel like that's not going to be his character. He have to tell himself it's all right because everything will work itself out. No,
Yeah.
that doesn't make any sense. He's the opportunity to go back and fix
stay
things.
out of it. Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense to me. It's really, really frustrating. And then for him to turn up in the same timeline. The other bit that really bugged me, which was that I thought it was a mistake. Then I realized, oh no, it's not a mistake. Is that when he goes on the platform to go back and return the stones, he takes Thor's hammer with him.
Yep.
So I was like, oh, okay, cool. I was like, hang on, what? Thor took his hammer, which changes the timeline, so he's got to put that back, right? So I realized that he's taken it with him because I don't think he did it first. I was like, oh no, he can take it back. No, the writers think that he didn't. The writers think that he kept
I didn't know this.
Yes, the writers thought that he kept the hammer because I read this interview where a person asked him, "Is like, so what happens with Thor now that he doesn't have his hammer earlier than in Ragnarok?" And you'd think, oh no, they would say just the obvious thing. Oh no, Captain America returned it when he returned the ether because he has it with him.
Yeah.
No, they don't say that. They're just like, oh, he just loses it earlier. It doesn't make any difference.
What?
Exactly. I was like no, because he uses it a lot in the Dark World.
I noticed I noticed Captain America took it with him because it was on the platform before he got on, and then he picks it up as well.
Yeah, so I
was like, what?
I feel like they didn't realize this, and maybe the directors did and put that as an insert shot that he took it with him.
Possibly, yeah.
Just to make sure that people were aware. So I figured that this is the thing. Like, this is the part that's been really frustrating, is that, and this has gotten the internet up in arms a little bit as well. Is they're pulling a Rowling. They're basically over explaining everything now. But the problem on top of it is you've got two writers and two directors, and they're quite often saying the same things, but sometimes they say completely different things.
Yeah.
Which isn't helping.
No.
And that's a perfect
they
example.
They need to get on the same page.
Yeah, those are two perfect examples of it. So anyway, but narratively then, this 5-year thing as well leads to a lot of problems.
Yeah.
The biggest of which is like the power struggle of a lot of like, so people they've opened up all these questions. So like there's a power struggle of like, so the people that have had to try and live through these 5 years have now had to try and create an environment, a space. All of a sudden there's like twice the population of everything back.
Just come back in. So
infrastructure's not there.
So food's already probably been depleted, or crops have died out because people aren't there to manage it. So the people that are still alive are dealing with what they can or what they have.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, half the
as many
population
people
comes
back,
back, and then it's like, shit.
Yeah.
What do we do?
There's problems with power struggles, essentially, where you have to create new governments and new things, and all of a sudden all these people are back. Wakanda's a perfect example. The king disappeared for 5 years. What happened in 5 years in Wakanda? The other thing is the age differences. Like, and this is where Spider-Man especially comes from. It's just convenient that all of Peter's main classmates and himself all got snapped away. Statistically, that's not really likely. Like, if you have a class of any number, it's going to be half of that class. I mean, the odds might be stacked slightly one or the other way. Maybe 47% in one class, 53% in another. But the odds are that in any class, half of those people are going to disappear. So all of a sudden, there's going to be an age difference. And they've said this.
It's all pretty much the main actors.
But all the main actors are all, it's just convenient for the plot. And it's fine. It's just what it is. We just have to accept it. But then this begs the question all over the place. And, I would rather have them gone back to the 5 years previous and just picked up as if nothing had happened.
Yeah.
I don't. This 5 year thing. You could have all the same narrative beats. You could have all the people who die. You can have all the changes. You have all the big battles. Everything can be exactly the same. It just doesn't have the 5 year thing, which I think it was a big mistake. I think that's the biggest problem with the movie overall. The more I think about it, is I just think the 5 year thing works narratively to put you forward, and that should have been 5 years. But at the end, instead of having it just conclude after the 5 years and nothing changes, everyone just comes back 5 years later. No, you should have taken everyone back using the time stones. You had the ability to.
Yeah. But then again, it's touched on in Doctor Strange is that you shouldn't really mess with the whole time situation and all that, so maybe that's why they didn't do that.
Yeah, but the other thing that to me that explains the whole thing is just that they're talking about things not being changed to revert timeline changes. So this seems like a good reason to go back to that point so that you continue on from where you were, so things doesn't get messed up. So it's contradictory. Again, another part of its contradictory nature of the time thing.
Yeah.
I in the end, I think it's a very there's a lot of balls in the air. It's a very juggly film, and there's a lot to commend about it. There's a lot of good things. I mean, we spent a lot of time talking about the things that we didn't perhaps like as much, but generally, the humour's on point, the action's really good, the characters all get reasonable good moments when they do have them. If at the end of the day, Natasha's the one character who probably gets the least
done with her.
Just because they start to take her in an interesting direction and then completely just throw off the cliff. It serviced 22, the conclusion of 22, soon to be 23 films very well, because obviously the 23rd film is still part of the universe, and this is where we understand this. Far From Home is clearly dealing with the fallout of the death of Iron Man and what that means to Peter Parker.
Peter just not dealing with it.
And also what it means moving forward with Nick Fury and the remains of whatever it is now, like not S.H.I.E.L.D.
Whatever S.H.I.E.L.D. is,
not S.H.I.E.L.D. And then obviously there's some discussion in the trailer about multiverses, which again gives you a reason to potentially bring characters back. If that's even true.
Or bring characters back, or bring new characters into the MCU, like the X-Men or the Fantastic Four, etc. But I don't know. We'll see what happens, whether that's actually true or whether it's a bunch of BS.
Now, I guess this is the question: are you still interested in moving forward? So, has Endgame kept you interested in what's happening next?
I think I'll probably go see Spider-Man just because it's somewhat the end of these last 22 films.
Now 23,
now 23. But I kind of think after that, I'll probably judge it as it comes, like see whatever the next film, which hasn't been announced yet.
We talked about.
I'll go see this.
We talked about previously. I think Guardians 3 would be the next thing that I'm very after Spider-Man. I'd be very keen to see. I mean, I really liked Spider-Man: Homecoming, so that's more my reason for seeing it. But it's very interesting. The more I've had time to reflect, and I have to see Endgame again at some point. I will. I've only seen it the one time, and there's a lot to take in. There's probably heaps I've missed, and there's heaps that we've even as we've been talking, we've realised, we forgot about this character. We forgot about this moment, But it kind of, there's a lot. It's 3 hours, so let's be honest, it's a big movie. And
go to the toilet before you see it.
Yeah, exactly indeed.
It's one of those movies you don't want to miss a thing.
No, that's the thing. I think it comes down to, even in its slowest moments, there's still the plot is still moving forward. Things are still wheels are still turning, and there's a lot going on. And I can understand why they didn't want to reduce the time below that 3 hours just to fit that in as it was. I'd be interested to see what they've left on the cutting room floor. To be quite honest, too.
No doubt it'll be on the Blu-ray.
Hopefully. I guess any last thoughts? I think we should probably leave it at this.
Yeah, we've pretty much probably touched on it. I think the only thing we didn't touch on is that I've just thought of is that in 1970s you see Tony Stark's father's driver, who is from the Marvel TV universe.
Yeah, is the only character from a TV show that's come to the movies.
Yeah,
characters from movies have gone to TV, but not the other way around.
Yeah, with the exception of Peggy Carter, who was in the movies first and then had her own TV show and then came back,
and Coulson as well. So this is Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. So
but he hasn't come back, so to speak. But so there was Edwin Jarvis, was Tony Stark's father's driver and butler and Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. And, he's the first actor / character from the TV series to come into the movie world and sort of reference
And there was some discussion about some of the other TV character heroes appearing, but then they realized it was just too messy.
Yeah, I think they were going to include the Netflix,
the Netflix
heroes,
ones.
but they're just like, no, we've got it.
It's too
we've
much.
got like what 40 people already.
I think the total amount in that final scene of major things is like 60 something. It's crazy.
It's just insane.
It is an insane amount. They did put in. We were talking about this the other day. How are the ducks in there, for example?
Yeah.
Like, there's probably these little random things in there that and I'm sure people over time, especially once the digital Blu-ray copies come out,
people sit there and pause it and stuff.
We'll probably
Go
find
frame
way
by frame.
more stuff that we didn't see at the movies. I'd forgotten about that. That's a good point about that. It's the only real major TV returny. That's a TV first
crossover.
Yeah. I think that's probably it. I haven't really got anything else I want to say. I mean, I could probably talk for another hour, but I think we've already talked for long enough, for about 40 odd minutes.
Probably gone for about that now. I think almost an hour now, to be honest.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think just moving forward, we've got the Falcon Winter Soldier TV series coming out.
And the WandaVision one, which again doesn't make any sense because she's alive but he's not.
Yeah, so
And
we'll need an explanation for that.
Yeah, and the Black Widow movie, and it's pretty interesting.
Yeah,
I don't. Some of these things I don't know, but I'm sure it'll make sense.
It'll come out somehow of what the story's going to be. But I think we should probably end that there.
Yeah, perfect.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening. If you've managed to listen to us ramble about Endgame for about an hour or so, almost under an hour.
And hope you enjoyed it. I mean, we did give you the spoiler warning at the start, so if you're sitting there going, you bloody ruined it for us, well, it's your own fault.
You should have listened.
You should have taken my warning.
Exactly. It's a spoilerific.
Yeah.
We'll be back eventually with an actual proper episode 7, and until then, we will catch you then. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, the
All
usual
that
jazz. It would be much appreciated. If you enjoy listening to us, let other people know so they can listen to us too. Yeah. Catch you next time.
So.